Greetings, bio students. This is Mr. Braun. Today we are going to talk about the three domains of life. So we're going to continue our discussion about classifications. Okay, we've been dealing with some dichotomous keys. And today what we're going to talk about is the domains. We're going to go through, and not only are we going to do the domains today, we're going to cover a little bit about kingdoms also. All right? So we're going to talk about the three domains, and then we'll talk about kingdoms. And then we'll finish up the discussion on kingdoms tomorrow. Okay? So, three domains. All right, let's check these domains out here. Let me get over. And all organisms belong to one of three domains, depending on their characteristics. A domain is the most inclusive taxonomic category, okay? So it is the broadest category. A single domain can have one or more kingdoms, okay? So this domain is the broadest of all categories. Back in the day, back when I was learning science, when I was sitting in your seat, okay, they didn't even have domains. The broadest category that I had when I learned this were the kingdoms, okay? So this is a new classification since I was even in high school, okay? So we're going to talk about three different types of domains, and these three domains are based on characteristics of the organisms. The first domain is archaea. The second domain is bacteria. And the third domain is eukarya. So those are our three different domains. And if I were to set these suckers up in a, how do I want to call it, into a clade or different clades, they would look something like this, where down here I have our common ancestor, okay? Our common ancestor then branches off bacteria, archaea, and then finally eukarya. So if you would look at this and say, okay, here's eukarya, what is eukarya more closely related to? Is it more closely related to bacteria, or is it more closely related to archaea? Well, based on our ability to read these cladograms, we would say that eukarya is more closely related to archaea. All right. Now, let's move on and discuss a little bit about these three. Archaea are very primitive forms of bacteria. Okay? Very primitive forms of bacteria. Bacteria are more advanced forms. So archaea, very primitive. Bacteria is more advanced. And then finally, we're going to get into eukarya, which is all life forms that have eukaryotic cells. Okay? So if we just go by that definition then, eukarya has eukaryotic cells, so this bacteria and this archaea must have what type of cells? That is correct, ladies and gentlemen. That would be prokaryotic cells. Okay? So once again, as I'm looking at this, you can see here, here's bacteria, here's archaea, here's eukarya, and the eukarya right here says that they have eukaryotic cells. And right here, the bacteria, the archaea, have prokaryotic cells. Organisms are placed into the domain based on their cell type and structure. We just said all eukaryotic cells are grouped into the domain eukarya. So all prokaryotic cells are going to be either bacteria or they are going to be archaea. Okay, so we're basing prokaryote, eukaryote. Now, we've already talked about prokaryotic cells, eukaryotic cells, so you should know some differences between a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell. So, as we click on to the next slide, we can see that organisms can be prokaryote. Pro means no, no nucleus. So prokaryotic cells have no nucleus. Pro means no. Prokaryotic cells also have no organ-bound or membrane-bound organelles. Pro means no. So a prokaryotic cell has no true nucleus, and they do not have membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotics are different. U means true. U means true. So eukaryotic cells do have what we call a true nucleus. Eukaryotic cells also have membrane-bound organelles. So just a little review of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about here is unicellular and multicellular. Unicellular, uni. What is uni? What's the prefix uni mean? Uni is one. So if something is unicellular, it is a single cell. It is made up of one cell. If something is multicellular, it is made up of many cells. Okay? Unicellular, a single-celled. Multicellular means it is made up of many cells. What do you think? What do you think we are? Yeah, I'm going to have to say I'm a multicellular organism because I have many cells throughout my body. Shoot, if I take my arm and I just scratch my arm, I can flake off a bunch of different cells. Okay, so I am definitely a multicellular organism. You ever heard of an autotroph? Ever heard of a heterotroph? Well, autotrophs, you should have heard of these. Autotrophs are organisms that can make their own food. So if you are autotrophic, you can make your own food. Well, what makes their own food? I'm sitting here, I'm looking out the window, I see a tree. A tree undergoes photosynthesis, where it takes the sunlight and it converts carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen. We've talked about photosynthesis before. So these autotrophs are ones that can make their own food. Anything that undergoes photosynthesis is an autotroph. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, cannot make their own food. So heterotrophs have to rely on their diet to get some important nutrients. Okay? So heterotrophs cannot make their own food. I cannot make my own food. I can grow my own food. I can put my food into a microwave and cook my own food, or I can cook it on a grill or on a stove. However, my body does not make the food. I have to get my nutrients through my diet. So I am a heterotroph. Okay? So these are just some different types of classifications that we look at the organisms to help us to determine which of the three domains that we would group these into. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the domain archaea first of all. Okay, here's a picture of three different organisms that come from the Archaea domain. Now, the funny thing about this, and it's really, I guess, not that funny, okay, but the thing about the domain Archaea is that the kingdom is also Archaea. So the domain Archaea has the kingdom Archaea. Now, what are some facts about the kingdom Archaea? Well, first of all, they are unicellular, prokaryotic, and then they can be either autotrophic or heterotrophic. So, they have a single cell. They do not have a nucleus, nor do they have membrane-bound organelles. They can be either autotroph, they can make their own food, or they can rely on others to make their own food, okay? They cannot make their own food, which is heterotrophic, okay? So, these are unicellular prokaryotic, okay? They are different from bacteria in the structure and the chemical makeup of their cells. They're different from bacteria in their structure and their chemical makeup of their cells. Their cell walls contain different compositions, okay? They do have cell walls, but they have different compositions. Here's yet another picture, okay? Some more about the kingdom Archaea. They are known as ancient bacteria. They are the most primitive type of all organisms. Okay? Ancient bacteria. They thrive in the most extreme environments on Earth. And we also, or sometimes we refer to these as the extremophiles, okay? Because anything that is a phile, they like. They like. So an extremophile literally is they like extreme environments. An extremophile. Now, what are some of these? Well, let me describe them here, okay? They can be found in thermal vents. Hot springs. So they like a very, very hot, warm environment. Okay? They could be a saline environment, which is a saltwater environment. Not everything likes saltwater. Some of these extremophiles really enjoy to be in a very salty conditions. Okay? These extremophiles can also be found in swamps. Sometimes they're found in the intestines of cows. Okay, very cold area. Right here is a very hot area where you can see the hot springs coming off there. Okay, and there's another hot extreme area right here. The extremophiles. The next domain we're going to talk about is bacteria. And the domain bacteria has the kingdom Eubacteria. If you remember, Eu means true. So we're talking about true bacteria here. Okay? So what's something about this true bacteria? They are found everywhere on Earth except the extreme environments. So this bacteria, they don't like it salty. All right? They don't like it when it's extremely hot. Other than those extreme environments, bacteria is found everywhere. Right now, I probably got some bacteria growing under my fingernails. Okay? Bacteria is everywhere. They are unicellular, so bacteria is single cell, prokaryotic. Once again, they can be autotrophic or heterotrophic. So they can make their own food, or they cannot make their own food. Okay, but they are definitely prokaryotes. They're definitely single celled. Their cell wall is made of something that we call peptidoglycan. Okay, peptidoglycan is the substance that makes up the cell wall of the bacteria. Little bit different than the cell wall of a plant. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Matter of fact, I think we're going to talk about that cell wall of the plant tomorrow when we talk about the kingdom Plantae. So we'll talk about plant cell walls tomorrow, but peptidoglycan is the substance that the cell wall of the bacteria is made of. Okay, you see here a bunch of little bacteria. You have these in your notes. If you want to color them, go ahead and color them. Okay, these look like a little red pills, but that's magnified many, many, many thousands of times. Those are bacteria. There's some more bacteria. Now, we are going to continue on tomorrow with our discussion over the domain eukarya.